Hello. In the world that we live in, the social structure can support, encourage, and nurture our attitudes and beliefs around the world. In this case, in some cases, we can start to sacrifice our political orientation. The people in our social network can push us, persuade, or even threat us to get back into the political alliance. In this project, I would like to consider the impact of confirmation bias and news framing on the most recent and vastly reported referendum in Europe concerning the British exit from the European Union, most commonly known as Brexit. On the 23rd of June 2016, the British public voted to leave the European Union with 52% of majority. The results shocked both the Brits and the remaining world. Inevitably, the negotiations commenced between the United Kingdom and the European Union to decide on the withdrawal agreement. Crucial matters of the Brexit, such as trade, law enforcement, data sharing, security, aviation standards, and safety, access to fishing waters, supplies of the electricity and gas, and licensing and regulation of medicines were influenced by Brexit. So, in the local news, in 2016, the year when the British public voted to leave the Brexit referendum, the Reuters Institute published the report on the coverage of the European Union referendum by the British press. The report includes the results on how Brexit was presented by 9 national newspapers. 41% of British newspapers supported the Leave campaign preceding the referendum, and only 27% of them supported the Stay campaign. In newspapers, and moreover, in these newspapers, 76% of the messages in the Leave newspapers had a negative tone before the referendum, and compared with only 36% of the negative messages in the Remain, for example, when they're discussing the future after the referendum. Moreover, the regions with the lowest number of immigrants gave the greatest preference to live in. Most likely, it is no coincidence that is in these regions that immigration has been covered in the media as one of the most important factors for making decisions on Brexit. The ambitious frame of getting my own country back formed a potent slogan that was firstly used by the British broadcaster and former politician who was a leader of the UK Independence Party. As the campaign intensified, the phrase increasingly appeared in most newspapers, including those that supported the Remain vote. While the term getting our country back was never adequately defined by politicians who used it, the phrase seems to imply that the country was besieged by East European migrants, plagued by open borders, subjected to the EU dictators, and subsequently lost its national sovereignty. A Sunday Times commentator argued, and he said that we all know that what getting my own country back means. It's a shortened line for the most pretentious and debating little English drug, nostalgia. Common sense and practical experience tell us that the UK will be worse off, is worse off following the Brexit. It is therefore plausible to suggest that those studies finding the net gains or any econometric studies about the Brexit that were made were gains, these net gains were highly motivated by the confirmation bias, the idea that some enthusiastic supporters of the Brexit, they wanted to prove a point, which is always possible by using some econometric modeling and then putting this into the newspaper. The suggest shows that confirmation bias, and this is ideological bias, led to a significant result that variably in several areas of economic research, including the net growth, including the role of the government in economic activity, the gun control, the capital structure, and so on. So, as for the theoretical background, the mediated reality may change for worse, as previously assumed in the word formation. Shaping is achieved by framing. Here, a frame is a way in which something is presented for the audience using words and images, and the use of such frame leads to the word framing. The media uses framing, focusing on a specific event and putting this in the way in the value of the field that they need. Framing selects specific aspects of the perceived reality and associates them with the narrative that advocates for particular interpretation. In other words, frames introduce and decrease and the accessibility of and the importance of the specific ideas. Furthermore, it brings the light on the assessment of perception of any political issue. So the confirmation bias is a predisposition to only consume the news, on which appears to be on the news, that it confirms the pre-existing attitudes and beliefs of the people. This plays out in a role in reading like the news, the postings that fit anybody's political or social learning. It is down to avoid cognitive dissonance as well as eventual disfavor from any social network that is used. So as for the social and economic outcomes, the manipulation in the media using confirmation bias and news framing led to people being very disappointed in the outcomes of the Brexit. Initially, the rate of the voters who supported Brexit was 52%, but the next day after the Brexit, it was 47% of people who were actually disappointed in the Brexit, and they did not like it as well as the exit poll suggested. The uncertainty of the Brexit caused a lot of volatility and affects the business operations in the UK. In the case of Brexit, the goods and services were subject to tariffs, increasing the cost of the raw material and in Britain and finished products out. In terms of the social rights, the UK is no longer the subject of campaign of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights. This has created a gap in human rights legislation and left others' rights at risk because they are not constitutionally protected. Since the UK doesn't have a constitution, they have only the Bill of Rights that is very, very old. So, in what ways can we solve the confirmation bias problem? Confirmation bias and news framing can lead to miscommunication, escalating conflicts, and even projected failures when the key pieces of information are overlooked. There are a few ways how to avoid it. First one is to focus on the falsification bias. Confirmation bias can be very strong influence, so a person will need to actively look for evidence that disproves his or her point of view, getting a different perspective. People can approach another people that they seem like that they have different position from theirs and ask them what they are seeing. We should be open to the other people's ideas and try to explore them. So in conclusion, of course, we live in the world of technology and we get all the information about the environment through the media. However, it is important to realize that every media outlet is biased and uses human weaknesses, such as confirmation bias, to convince us of our position once again. That is not actually our position. Therefore, it is everyone's responsibility to do everything possible to avoid giving into the framing of the news and making crucial mistakes in their lives, as people regretted after Brexit. Thank you very much. Goodbye.